So Clark and Chris, come on up, take the stage, and tell us what you're doing and why we should think of you as in terms of next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. It's good to be here today. Chris and I are going to split the time together looking at what it means to transform an organization. This is an analysis from Ken Doctor, who writes the great Newsonomics blog. This was digital revenue growth rates for traditional media companies in 2010, 10.9%. In 2011, it was 6.6% across the industry. In 2012, it was 3.7%. In 2013, it was 1.5%. So this is not a good trend line. And meanwhile, they're surrounded by an industry that's in hypergrowth still. The entire industry is growing at rates well above double-digit rates, and yet this trend line for traditional media continues to fall. Well, why is that happening? There's a concept in economics called local versus global maximum. In the case of a local maximum, you get to a peak, and then if you go any direction from that peak, it's a downward movement. In other words, you can't go any higher without actually going down first. When I look at a lot of other media companies who have tried to transform their business model, they're stuck on local peaks. That's why their growth rates are declining so fast. And why are you stuck on a local peak? Well, you're selling through people who are selling traditional media. You've got a business model that's still rooted in traditional media. You can get growth out of that, but then it stops. And at a certain point, you can't grow anymore. That's what's happening in the US media industry today, is they're trapped on that local maximum, rather than making the hard decision to come off the local maximum, which actually causes you to go down at first. But then you can go back up because now you're focused on a different target or different goal. So if you're not growing at double-digit growth rates still, then you haven't transformed your business. And by the way, these first four questions and these first four numbers I've shared, they're really unambiguous. Like, I remember for years I talked to people, and it's going to be my last point here before I hand it to Chris, about what it takes to transform your business. And we had looked at a database of over 100 industries and 800 or 900 firms facing disruptive innovation across a whole myriad, over 100 different industries. And it turned out that growth rates that ever exceeded the peak of the industry before the disruption, only 9% of firms ever grow again. So think about that. A disruption hits an established industry. Those established firms, less than 10% ever grow again from their peak. But of the 9%, or that small percent who grow again, 100% have a separate organization focused around the disruptive growth, that global maximum. In other words, the other 90% are stuck on that local maximum, and they shout till their face is blue, till they're blue in the face, that they're smart and they're capable and they know what they're doing. And they even might say, well, look, we've looked at setting up a separate group, but it doesn't work as well. Well, it doesn't work as well because if you're on the top of that local hill, any step you take is a downward movement. So if your horizon is only this far out from where you are, there is no direction you can move that isn't a downward movement in your progress. But if your horizon can go beyond that, then you can see the global maximum and reach that again. And that relates to the last number I'll share on questions to ask whether you've transformed your business. 0%. That's the percentage of time our digital team spends thinking about the traditional business. This team at Deseret Digital Media spends 100% of their time thinking about how to grow their digital business. That right there is the answer to every other question I walked through today. It's why we have over 1/3 of our revenue coming from digital. It's why half of that comes from e-commerce or marketplace businesses. It's why we're still growing in double-digit levels when the rest of the industry is shrinking each year. Those are fundamental questions around innovation. And if you're not organized for that, you're not going to be able to adapt as the future evolves. Now,
so a few things we've learned about native, just as a summary. Number one, do not blur editorial and sales. Keep them separated. Critical to do for lots of reasons. Be transparent. Clearly label native ads as advertising, as sponsored content. Create a clear and consistent ad policy related to all of these areas. What we've done, and we would recommend certainly, is to variabilize the content costs by using outside contributors, using freelancers. Building an entire team is recipe for disappointment, for boards, for investors. Variabilizing costs as the business grows has been one of our hallmarks.
Real quick follow-up. Are actually journalists the best content creators for natives, or is there a different profile?
That is a great question. And I think the answer, I would say, is journalists might be great contributors, but we really view our journalists as a separate organization. The production of news, we keep sacrosanct. It's a separate organization. The editorial team is completely separate from our native team. We've got a head of our native organization who comes from a bit of a PR background. Still generally communications, has a lot of background in journalism, but is a PR expert. And he has a team under him that are remote contributors and editors who produce content. I think journalists could absolutely produce native content, but in our organization, I think the recommendation we would make is that they not be on both sides of that fence. They're on one side or the other.
Clay Christensen's original research said you have to set up a separate group for disruptive innovation. That simple, almost rule of thumb heuristic, the more I watch the industry and I watch people just bang their heads against the wall, people who are smart, but they refuse to let go of that one premise, which is I can do this from my existing organization. That one decision has proven problematic. The slide I put up of revenues with the red line barely coming off of the rest of total revenues. It's really a tragic story. It's, this, and I've had this argument with people in the industry for 10 years, and rather than make the arguments and go through all the reasons why a sales rep can't sell both, why a newsroom person can't write both types of content, I've in this discussion today and increasingly, I've just said, look at the metrics. The companies in this industry, Forbes, Shibstead, Deseret Digital, the Atlantic Media Group, that have transformed their business model, meaning a third of their revenue now is digital only. Half of that is mobile ready. They're still growing in double-digit growth rates. Those companies have separate groups organized for innovation that's separate from the core business. What we wouldn't, our digital revenue for our our Deseret Digital Media is bigger than our TV station. Why would we suck it back into the TV? Right? It's a third of our newspaper revenue. Why would I suck that back into the newspaper organization? But I don't think people are looking at the right question. They're saying, I need to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you can't transform yourself that way.